Imagine a snake so large it could swallow an entire crocodile, so heavy that a modern anaconda would look like a worm next to it, so long that it would take an entire bus to measure it. This creature existed, and it wasn't that long ago. Welcome to today's video, where we'll delve into the history of Titanoboa, the largest snake that ever slithered across the earth. If you're already curious about this topic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for even more surprising facts. Our story begins in 2009 in the sweltering heat of Colombia, not in a rainforest, but in a far more unlikely place, a coal mine, the Cerrejón mine to be more specific. A huge hole dug in northern Colombia where workers extracted coal day after day. But Cerrejón held a secret far more valuable than fossil fuel. A team of paleontologists was there for a special reason. They weren't looking for coal, they were looking for fossils. And those layers of ancient rock were actually the compressed remains of a rainforest that existed 60 million years ago, shortly after the dinosaurs disappeared. And then they found something, a vertebra, but not an ordinary vertebra. It was massive, thicker than an adult man's wrist. Now, when you're a paleontologist and you find enormous bones in tropical Paleocene rocks, you automatically think of crocodiles. Makes sense, right? Crocodilians were the giants of those ancient swamps. A reptile the size of a bus already seemed to be pushing the boundaries of credibility. But something was wrong. The shape was strange. The curves didn't match the crocodile vertebrae that the researchers knew so well. And then came the shock. It wasn't a crocodile, it was a snake. Let me repeat this because it's important. A snake, with bones larger than those of a giant crocodile. As the team recovered more vertebrae, dozens of them, along with ribs and other associated fossils, one thing became undeniable. This was not chance or exaggeration. The fossils were consistent, enormous, and unlike anything else in the paleontological record. What emerged was a portrait of an animal so large that it instantly redefined the upper limit of what a snake could be. Cerrejón is not just any fossil site, it's a time capsule. A complete Paleocene rainforest, sealed by a sudden burial of mud and ash. Leaves, fish, turtles, entire portraits of an ancient world preserved in stunning detail. And in that mud, the largest snake remains anyone had ever seen. The news came as a shock. When the research team first measured the vertebrae, they recalculated them over and over again, convinced that the numbers had to be wrong. But they weren't. Measurements indicated the snake was over 15 meters long. The researchers were astonished. If those numbers were accurate, Titanoboa wasn't just a large snake, it was the largest land predator on Earth after the dinosaurs. Its size implied Paleocene ecosystems that were far warmer, far denser, and far more competitive than scientists had imagined. Such a massive creature could only exist in a world pushing biology to its limits. What kind of planet created monsters like this? Titanoboa was absurdly large. The most conservative estimates place its length at around 13 meters, but some estimates go as far as over 15 meters, and it weighed between 900 and 1,100 kilograms. For context, the largest anaconda ever reliably measured was about 8.5 meters long and weighed around 230 kilograms. So Titanoboa was almost twice as long and 4 to 5 times heavier. But here's what I find fascinating. How do scientists manage to determine the size of an extinct animal from just a handful of vertebrae? Well, modern snakes follow fairly predictable scaling laws. The size of their vertebrae correlates directly with their total body length. So paleontologists can measure a Titanoboa vertebra, compare it to modern constrictors like boas and anacondas, and extrapolate backward. But there's a deeper question here. Why was Titanoboa so much larger than any snake alive today? The answer lies in the temperature. Look, snakes are ectothermic. They can't regulate their own body temperature. They depend entirely on the environment to stay warm, and this shapes almost everything about them. Their metabolism, their growth, even the upper limit of their size. Think of it this way: the warmer the environment, the faster a snake's metabolism works. Faster metabolism means faster growth, more efficient digestion, and the ability to sustain a much larger body. So when scientists discovered Titanoboa, they weren't just looking at a giant predator. They were reading a climate record, a biological thermometer from 60 million years ago. And he was pointing to a world that was much warmer than the one we live in now. To understand Titanoboa, you need to understand its world. Go back about 58 million years to the Paleocene epoch, just a few million years after the dinosaurs disappeared. The Earth is recovering, ecosystems are rebuilding, and the tropics are transforming into something almost unrecognizable to us. Global temperatures were much higher than they are today. In what is now northern Colombia, estimates suggest average year-round temperatures of at least 32 degrees Celsius, with almost no seasonal relief. Imagine a tropical rainforest that never cools down, not even at night. A world where the air itself feels like a constant sauna. No polar ice caps, no winters, just a relentless humid heat stretching from pole to pole. Forests sweated, streams steamed in the sun, and life thrived. Because for cold-blooded animals, heat removes the greatest restriction of all. Today's rainforests, the Amazon, the Congo, Southeast Asia, are actually too cold for a snake like the Titanoboa to exist. Modern anacondas and pythons are pushing against the upper limits of what our current climate allows. To extend beyond its size and into Titanoboa's territory, a world several degrees warmer consistently for millions of years would be necessary. Titanoboa wouldn't be able to survive today. Its massive body needed that intense heat to accelerate its metabolism, to pump blood through 15 meters of spirals. The Cerrejon site reveals this world in detail. Layer upon layer contains plant fossils. There are shells of giant turtles, some the size of billiard tables. Primitive relatives of crocodiles with blunt, crushing teeth suggest a diet of hard-shelled prey. They were not elegant river runners, but ambush predators with heavy jaws. This was not a clear, fast-flowing river system. It was a humid swamp forest. Murky, slow-moving water, intertwined roots, and dense vegetation. Visibility would have been poor. The sound muffled by the constant rain and buzzing insects. In such an environment, size could be a massive advantage. A giant snake could hide in the water, its bulk supported by buoyancy, its body concealed by tannin-tinged currents. Heat and humidity would keep her muscles warm and ready, allowing her to move when needed, then remain still, digesting enormous meals over weeks or months. The Titanoboa, in this context, is no accident. It's a direct logical result of an extreme world. High temperatures, abundant prey, and a swampy labyrinth perfect for slow, patient ambushes. So here's the question everyone wants to know. How did Titanoboa actually hunt? Well, forget everything you've seen in the movies. Titanoboa wasn't some hyper-aggressive monster chasing prey on land. It wasn't a terrestrial racing python or a tree-dwelling boa constrictor. Titanoboa was simply too big for that. Over 13 meters of muscle doesn't glide quickly across forest floors. It sinks, drags, fights against gravity at every inch. But in the water, everything changes. In the swamps of the Paleocene, Titanoboa behaved less like a modern snake and more like a crocodile. Slow, silent, half-submerged, he used the swamp's murky water as camouflage, gliding between fallen logs and root systems with only the slightest disturbance on the surface. For an animal of that size, invisibility wasn't a trick. It was a way of life. He didn't chase, he didn't run, he waited. Hours, maybe days, almost motionless, until something wandered close enough, and when it attacked, its strength was terrifying. Biomechanical models estimate that Titanoboa could exert well over 400 psi of constriction pressure, more than enough to crush a crocodile's ribs in an instant. Modern boas and pythons rely on restricting blood flow to subdue prey. But at Titanoboa's size, the distinction hardly matters. The result was the same. Whatever it coiled around wouldn't escape. Based on the ecosystem we know existed in Cerrejon, Titanoboa's diet likely included giant, slow-moving, abundant, and calorie-rich turtles, perfect prey for an ambush predator. Primitive crocodiles, smaller than Titanoboa, and not yet evolved into the apex predators they are today. Large fish, common in river systems, easy to catch in confined channels. Possibly primitive mammals, although mammals were still relatively small in the Paleocene. Anyone venturing too close to the water's edge would have been a fair target. Water was not just their hunting grounds, it was their lifeline. The buoyancy of the water supported its massive weight. Without it, Titanoboa would have had difficulty moving efficiently on land. Its internal organs would have been compressed by its own body mass, making breathing difficult, digestion slow, and movement exhausting. And perhaps more importantly, water helped regulate their body temperature. Snakes absorb heat from their surroundings, and in the stifling climate of the Paleocene, water provided a way to stay cool when needed, while still maintaining the high metabolic rate necessary to sustain such a large body. So when you picture Titanoboa, don't imagine it slithering across land like a nightmarish serpent. Imagine it gliding silently through dark water, its eyes just above the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. So, if Titanoboa was such a successful predator, perfectly adapted to its environment, why doesn't it exist anymore? Well, the answer is both simple and tragic. The world has changed, and Titanoboa couldn't keep up. After the Paleocene epoch, the Earth began to cool. Gradually at first, then more rapidly. Average global temperatures dropped several degrees Celsius over a few million years. And for an ectothermic giant like Titanoboa, that was a death sentence. Here's the thing about being cold-blooded. Your metabolism is directly linked to the ambient temperature. When it gets colder, your metabolism slows down, digestion takes longer, movement becomes slow, growth rates plummet. For a creature as large as Titanoboa, this was catastrophic. It needed an enormous amount of food just to maintain its body mass. But with a slower metabolism, it couldn't hunt as effectively. It couldn't digest prey quickly enough, and it couldn't grow large enough to compete with other predators. Essentially, Titanoboa died of starvation in slow motion. But it wasn't just the temperature. The entire ecosystem was changing. Mammals, which had been relatively small and insignificant during the age of dinosaurs, were beginning to diversify and grow. They were warm-blooded, which meant they could remain active even when temperatures dropped, and they were competing for the same resources that the giant reptiles depended on. Meanwhile, the lush, swampy rainforests of the Paleocene were drying up. River systems became more seasonal. The dense, humid environment in which Titanoboa thrived was disappearing, and perhaps more importantly, other large reptiles were also dying. The giant turtles, the massive crocodiles, the entire food web that sustained Titanoboa was collapsing. Yes, Titanoboa died, not from predation, not from disease, not from competition. It died because the planet cooled by just a few degrees. That's all it took. A small change in the global climate, and the largest snake that ever lived simply ceased to exist. And that should give us pause for thought. Because climate doesn't just shape ecosystems. It defines the upper and lower limits of what is possible for life. Titanoboa was a creature that should never have existed. It was too big, too heavy, too dependent on a world that was always destined to change. But for a brief moment in Earth's history, all the conditions aligned perfectly. And for millions of years, the largest serpent that ever lived reigned in the swamps of ancient Colombia. And then, as quickly as she appeared, she disappeared, leaving behind only bones and questions. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. See you next time.